All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today we're going to zero in on a very specific police encounter, but we are doing it by strictly focusing on the indisputable facts of the situation. We're throwing out the assumptions, we're ignoring the narratives, and we are just looking at what can be physically proven. We're talking geography, the actual timeline, and objective medical records. Because when you strip everything else away, the raw facts on the ground tell a totally different, highly structured story.
So here's the big question we're answering today. What exactly happens when the legal codes slapped on a piece of paper literally do not match the physical reality of what happened? To find out, we're going to unravel a pretty dramatic arrest that went down in Chula Vista, California, and we're doing it by working backward. We'll trace the physical timeline, the objective data collected by paramedics, and the strict geographic realities of the location itself.
To figure this all out, we're going to walk through 5 key areas. 1. The incident timeline. 2. The medical crisis. 3. The geographic facts. 4. The 3 legal charges. And finally, 5. The factual defenses.
Okay, Part 1. The incident timeline. The date is May 2nd, 2026.
Looking at how the day unfolded, things actually started pretty tense. At 7:30 in the morning, in a Target parking lot, police removed this individual's vehicle tags over a dispute, which basically left the car without plates. Now fast forward to 4:30 p.m. at a Days Inn parking lot. The individual is a registered guest there. He's just cleaning his parked car, engine is completely off. A few seconds later, his daughter walks up, a police officer pulls up and starts yelling, and just minutes after that, the individual is tackled to the ground.
Now what's truly wild here is how fast a completely mundane situation blew up into physical force. Let's break it down step by step. Step 1, he brings an open beer from his hotel room, puts it up on the car roof specifically to keep it away from the kids inside, and starts cleaning his car. Step 2, his daughter, who's already scared of the police, comes downstairs. Step 3, she asks him for something and he reaches to hand it to her, mentioning out loud that he's going to lock the car. Step 4, an officer arrives and instantly barks, "Stop reaching." And Step 5, multiple officers grab him, twist him around, and tackle him hard to the pavement.
Which brings us to Part 2, the medical crisis, looking strictly at the objective paramedic data.
This sudden escalation caused a severe medical emergency known as positional asphyxia. Basically, that's respiratory and circulatory failure caused when a person's body position literally stops them from being able to breathe. This individual, who, by the way, was just days out of being treated for pneumonia, was pinned face down on the pavement. The left side of his face was crushed into the ground, his left arm was pulled tight across his chest, and he had the sheer weight of multiple officers pressing down on his back. He actually gasped, "I can't breathe," but the physical pressure led directly to this life-threatening condition.
And, the undeniable proof is right there in the medical records. When the paramedics got to the scene, they couldn't even find a radial pulse on his wrist. His oxygen levels had tanked to dangerously low levels. This was a massive failure of his respiratory and circulatory systems, which meant he had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance immediately. In fact, his Miranda rights weren't even read at the scene. They had to read them to him later while he was lying in a hospital bed. This objective medical reality is just such a crazy contrast to the actual suspected violation, which was, remember, just an open container of beer sitting on a car roof.
All right, let's move to Part 3, geographic facts. Because in this case, location is absolutely everything. Let's map out the reality here. The arrest happened at 394 Broadway in Chula Vista. Now, that is a private, commercial hotel parking lot. If you check out the geographic analysis, the nearest city park, Memorial Park, is over between Parkway and 4th Avenue. The actual distance from the hotel lot to the very edge of that park is about 0.3 miles. And we're talking a distance separated by 3 or 4 whole city blocks and a bunch of other private properties.
Now you might be asking, why does a third of a mile even matter? Well, it's a real game changer because of how the police cited the municipal code. The specific law they use targets areas that are within or immediately adjoining a city park. And legally, immediately adjoining basically means sharing a property line or being right across a narrow street. Since the Days Inn is definitely not inside a park, doesn't adjoin a park, and is just a private hotel lot anyway, the municipal code simply does not apply here, period. The sheer geography completely invalidates the charge.
Which brings us to Part 4, the 3 legal charges: state, city, and resisting.
Let's break down the massive gap between what's written on the paperwork and actual reality. Charge number 1, the state open container infraction. The factual defense here? It's a private hotel lot, not a government-owned public space. Plus, California law has this specific cleanup exception, which fits perfectly with bringing a can outside to keep it away from kids while you clean your car. Charge 2, the city open container infraction. Like we just covered, this requires the lot to physically touch a park, which it factually doesn't. And then charge 3, misdemeanor resisting arrest. This is the big one, bringing us to a really complex defense. Basically, the officer lacked reasonable suspicion, making the entire detention unlawful.
Finally, let's jump into part 5, factual defenses. This is where we apply the law directly to the reality of the situation. When you look at California Penal Code Section 148A1, that's the resisting arrest charge, there is a strict, non-negotiable requirement. The officer has to be lawfully performing their duties. If the initial stop or the detention is legally flawed from the jump, meaning it's an unlawful detention, you literally cannot be convicted of resisting it. An officer's authority is 100% tied to the lawfulness of their actions.
And this, right here, is why our timeline of facts is so critical. Think about it. Reaching into your car to hand something to your kid in a private hotel lot where you're paying to stay, all while verbally stating you're just locking up to go inside, that does not factually give a cop reasonable suspicion that a crime is happening. Without actual, specific facts pointing to criminal activity at that exact second, the officer's aggressive command to stop reaching and the physical tackle that followed, they were legally baseless. The detention was flat out unlawful.
Which leads us to a fascinating legal concept you might have heard of, the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. Since the officer didn't have reasonable suspicion to detain the guest to begin with, that detention was an illegal seizure. So the doctrine says that any evidence found after that illegal move, including the officer eventually noticing the beer can, is tainted. By filing a Penal Code 1538.5 motion, you can get that evidence legally suppressed, which basically guts the entire foundation for all 3 of the charges.
But we can't stop there. We also have to talk about the Fourth Amendment and use of force standards. In a case called Graham v. Connor, the U.S. Supreme Court set the rule that police force has to be objectively reasonable compared to how severe the crime is and the actual threat the person poses. The Chula Vista Police Department's own Policy 300 says the exact same thing. So tackling a nonviolent guy who was just cleaning his car on private property so hard that his pulse stops and he goes into respiratory failure, all over a suspected open beer, that heavily contradicts every established standard for use of force.
So, knowing all these facts, what's the game plan? Well, the recommended actions are pretty clear. First off, categorically plead not guilty to all of it. Do not just pay the fine and walk away. Second, get legal counsel ASAP so you can file motions to dismiss based on all these geographic and legal mismatches we just talked about. Third, file formal complaints about the excessive force. And, this is a big one, use the California Public Records Act to get your hands on the police body camera footage. That's going to give you an unblinking, objective record of the actual timeline and exactly how severe that tackle really was.
I think this quote from the legal analysis really hits the nail on the head. It perfectly summarizes what we've unpacked today. When you actually look closely, the laws cited by the police on paper completely miss the reality of where this happened and how it happened. The physical map proves the city ordinance is invalid, the state law literally has a built-in exception for cleaning up, and the total lack of reasonable suspicion blows up the resisting charge. When you lay it all out, the facts on the ground completely dismantle the charges on paper.
So I want to leave you with a critical question to chew on. When the cold, hard, objective facts, the map, the medical monitors, the basic timeline of a dad just handing something to his daughter, when those facts completely contradict the official police narrative, how do we ensure accountability in the legal system? It just shows exactly why mapping out the indisputable facts, taking the emotion out of it, and building your defense around the undeniable geographic and physical reality is absolutely the best way to defend your rights. Keep digging into the facts, keep asking the hard questions, and seriously, never just take the paperwork at face value.